Well, they're easier on the whole, because more people's always easier than 100 people. Someone's always laughing. When I was, this tour sold about twice as well as anything I've done before. And the promoters were sort of saying to me, "How's it going to work? What you do in those bigger rooms?" But actually, rooms like that York Theatre Royal, where it's an 1800s building, it's got that old sort of style where there's a balcony in a circle and no one's more than about 500 yards away. They work really well. What's difficult is doing the same amount of people in a sort of modern theatre or these town halls where everyone's just in rows of seats along the floor and they feel like they've stretched far into the distance, and the acoustics in those rooms are really bouncy as well because they're sort of built for classical music. The last few years of touring, I've always tried to think about how to use the space anyway, and so before I do the show in those rooms, I go and have a look all around them and see what the eye lines are, where people can see you from, how close to the edge of the stage can you stand, and if you go off stage, where can you be seen, where can't you be seen, and where can you get to? And the great thing about a room like the York Theatre last night is there's lots of passageways and places you can get to and stuff you can do, you know. So it's just about trying to do the same thing as usual, but thinking about how it plays in that sort of space and use the whole space, really. I think I probably can carry on what I do to bigger amounts of people if I'm just a bit careful about what the venue is. But I don't think what I do would ever work in a stadium on a screen. Most of the people that come know what they're coming to. There aren't people that are coming on a Saturday night who are then bored and disappointed that there weren't more jokes and it wasn't more like comedy, which is what used to happen, because most of the people that are coming have probably seen a bit of what I do now. The good thing about that is it means you can go further with certain things. You can go further with the long stories don't look like they're going anywhere. You can go further with being a bit obtuse because they trust you more. But the bad thing about that, and it is sort of, especially it's an occupational hazard for all sorts of people in performance, is that it is harder to sort of create the element of risk and danger or the thought that things might go wrong because most people there are on your side. And I think one of the exciting things about stand-up is the genuine possibility of failure, or at least the illusion of failure, which you don't get quite so in such quite a pronounced way in other areas of performance. So I just have to work a bit harder to sabotage it. You want to try and shake them off at some point, I think, and lose them and then win them back. And I think what's happened on this tour is that I think people understand the process of that. They understand that they're being lost or shaken off or asked to consider something that they might find morally abhorrent, but they assume that there'll be some kind of way it's tied up at the end, both in terms of what you're talking about and how you talk about it. So that's nice, really. But I do like that. I mean, I kind of think it's not very nice to be in an audience for stand-up where everyone's agreeing with the person on the stage. There's something a little bit horrible and frightening about it, I think. And so it's always nice to create that element of doubt and confusion of where's this going. I'm never worried about getting away with something, but I mean, there's things I wrote 5-10 years ago that I probably wouldn't now, just because what I'm squeamish about changes as you have kids, for example, or you have a different kind of experience of life. I mean, if you can't get away with something in a room because people are just too uncomfortable about it, the chances are you haven't. It's not that the subject material's wrong, it's just that you haven't phrased it right or contextualised it properly. Like when I did that show in 2005, 90s Comedian, where there was a long half-hour bit at the end about basically having this kind of almost sexualised encounter with a kind of dream vision of Jesus in a toilet. And it was like a half-hour long bit. And it didn't work the first few times because it was too sort of violent and unforgiving. And then my wife said to me, "You need to make this more tender, like they're trying to sort of help each other, you and this character." And all the elements of it stayed the same, but just the sort of tone of it went from one of aggression to one of sort of despair, and then you kind of got it to work. So I don't think there is any such thing as an unacceptable subject. There's just different ways of delivering things, and no one would ask that question of a playwright or a poet or a songwriter or a filmmaker can you make a film about this? It's assumed that you can do most art about most things. The only reason people ask questions like that about comedy is because the assumption is that you're laughing at something, at its expense, whereas in fact you can be laughing about something. And also what's really changed in stand-up, that's different to any of those other areas, is the personality of the person telling the story really changes it. And that's something that doesn't come across on paper when a newspaper try and take a sentence out of context, is what went before and what comes after, and what's the sort of status of the person saying it. When I engaged in the debate with all the fundamentalists and people on the far right about Jerry Springer the Opera, because you had to explain yourself, people that would have liked it or might have come, it was sort of spoilt for them, because you kind of, it's what they call spoilers when they review films. You almost had to wreck the surprises of your own work in order to justify it. And also you had to do something worse really, which was explain to the audience what the metaphors were and what the symbolic scheme in it was, and there's nothing left for them to find out for themselves. So with the Mail on Sunday thing this time about Richard Hamill, I just completely ignored it, and I refused every invitation to clarify my position, because if you know my work, it's really obvious that I wouldn't be saying that someone should be killed in a car crash and that there'd be some other point to it. So anyone coming would know that and would still like it and get it, so you just had to ignore it really.